Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings to the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to Thou Mother with Thy Equal Brood, a 6-section poem that we will study all in one reading together. This is one of only now 2 poems remaining that are not included in a cluster at the conclusion of Leaves of Grass, the final 130 poems, as we said in our last conversation. Now, some see this as Whitman's weakest poem, believe it or not. Some see this as a poem that proves Whitman to be a prophet to the world, an international poet of some. Whitman is for sure going to celebrate his views of democracy here. We're going to see that. In some ways, this will be the last celebration of American democracy that we will find in Leaves of Grass. And to ask, why is it here after, for example, that cluster of Whispers of Heavenly Death, as we just finished with? I think that for Whitman, there's great concern about the future of America. I think it's clear that Whitman is concerned about the possibility that America may not become the great, great dynamic power that he so hopes it to be, which is why some people have seen that he almost is over-protesting. Methinks the lady doth protest too much. You'll remember from Hamlet that there may be some of that happening here as well. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt, and that you've been with us from the very first opening poems of inscriptions all the way up to and including our recent conversations with the 18 poems of Whispers of Heavenly Death. And we, of course, are already kind of assuming that you have some familiarity with this text. And if you don't, that's okay. But my hope is that you would at least have some background so that you'll begin to hear what we call those echoes. We talk, of course, about our learning theory, that desire to connect new information to old information in meaningful ways. That is to say, the new is the new, because that is to say the NEW is the KNEW. We're going to see that in this poem. The ideas of trying to read at multiple levels. I'll remind you, at level 1, what does the text say? At level 2, what does the text mean? 2A, themes, messages. 2B, of course, rhetoric, not what is said, but how it's said. We're going to concentrate on word choice as we study this poem for reasons that we'll get into. Notice this use of the word brood, for example, at the very beginning of the poem. And then we're also going to assess our big 5, as we say it. About every text we'll ask, what does this text say about epistemology, what you can know, and Whitman's fallible disposition as we've defined it? Ontology, who we are. We're going to hear a lot about that. Body as well as soul, spirit. We'll for sure hear that. Psychology, sociology, the study of the individual mind. Psychology of the group mind, sociology. That'll be important for us. And then finally, and we've made this argument many times in our conversations, that Whitman is creating a theodicy. That is to say, why must there be terrible things that happen? We're going to hear some of that. And his ultimate goal is to no longer ask, why did this happen to us, but rather, why did this happen for us? We'll play that game out. Now, we've commented on Whitman, and we call them the 5 Ps. Whitman as person, Whitman as poet, Whitman as politician, etc., etc. Whitman as philosopher. We're going to see all of those at play here as well. Now, let's turn to our Nortons, as we are often wont to do. And we're told by Nortons that in response to the invitation, not entirely guileless, of a group of Dartmouth seniors to deliver their commencement poem, June 26, 1872, Whitman composed As a Strong Bird on Pinions Free. We're going to get to that line in part 2. Presented it in Hanover with only fair success, then published it that year as the title poem of a small volume containing 7 other poems. This volume, without new pagination, became a supplement bound to the 2 with 2 rivulets of 1876. Whitman incorporated this poem in Leaves of Grass 1881 with minor revisions, adding the present first canto of 4 stanzas, which in 1872 had appeared as One Song, America Before I Go. Its first stanza, increased to 4 lines, reiterated the new title here and intensified its purport. Although the Dartmouth occasion had been arranged with evident intent to annoy the faculty, Whitman took it in good faith as justifying his claim to national attention. Indeed, he wrote a flamboyant press release for the Washington papers, which refused to run it. For the volume of 1872, Whitman wrote an important preface reviewing his past hopes and present plans with elegant candor. This poem has deserved attention as a central statement of Whitman's convictions about the role of the equal brood of the states in American democracy and the future of that democracy in the world order. The power of the idealism has overcome the rhetoric. And again, some will agree with what Norton's has to say, others will not. Point for your notes right away, though, at 2b, the what we will call epic or bardic voice of this poem. Whitman is visionary, as it's sometimes referred to. Now, right away, think about the bardic voice with the thou and thee. Some of you in previous poems have said, you don't really approve of this. Some of you like that idea, especially when it's that prophetic voice of his. Think about the fact that 101 times up to this moment, the word mother has been used. But after this use here in the first line of this poem, we won't hear it again, but for 19 more times. In other words, the preponderance of the use of the feminine mother will have happened earlier on. Of course, you can hear as well in I Hear America singing, right? The delicious singing of the mother. The celebration of the mother has been central. That use of the word equal, you'll remember this, to him that was crucified, we few equals. And of course, the word brood, we'll have remembered this one in Poets to Come, a new brood. So we'll work now section by section, all 6 sections, and I wish that we had more time. We could just read the entire poem, because I love the reading of this poem. You can tell that it is constructed to be read out loud, and certainly has a lot of that dynamic energy as well. Let's enjoy the poem now, section 1. Thou mother with thy equal brood, thou varied chain of different states, yet one identity only out of the many one. A special song, Before I Go. Now this Before I Go, I think, is central to its placement here in the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass, with only 129 poems left after this one. Whitman is focusing on the fact that he has to go, and so before he goes, he says, I'd sing o'er all the rest for thee, the future. And you can skip ahead to the very last line of this poem, and it will be capped in all caps, the idea of the future. In other words, a visionary. Now we got 3 of these anaphoria. I'd sow a seed for thee of endless nationality. And go back to plowman, plowing with the sowing of the seed. This is obviously a word picture that works rather nicely in a collection called Leaves of Grass, yes? Endless nationality, notice capitalized. Still though the one I sing, you'll remember this use of this word. I'd fashion, that's an interesting use of the word. We're going to get formula here in a little bit. I'd fashion thine ensemble, including body and soul. Back to Song of Myself 48. I'd show a way ahead thy real union, again, Whitman as prophet, and how it may be accomplished. So it's a 2-part dance in this poem. We're going to talk about the future. We're going to talk about how it can be accomplished, right? Keep going. The paths to the house I seek to make, again, the house being the nation. Again, the paths takes us back to Song of the Open Road. But leave to those to come. I told you guys about his use of the word leave in Leaves of Grass, yes. But leave to those to come the house itself. Think about Poets to Come. I'm going to mention that poem a number of times in our study here. Belief, I sing, and preparation. In other words, to build a nation, to build a civilization, he's going to argue, you got to have 2 things. Obviously, you got to have a vision, you got to have belief, but you also have to have the work that will be a part of this preparation. As life and nature, notice both capitalized, are not great with reference to the present only. Again, it's all going to be about the future in this poem, but greater still from what is yet to come. Out of that formula, we're going to get that word 4 times, or some use of that notion, formula, for thee I sing. It's a great introduction. It's a great introduction to what is yet to come. Again, I told you guys about the power of the word come. The very first word in the deathbed edition is the word come, that invitation, and here we're coming to it again, no pun intended. Then in passage 2, we get into the joy of this, and it's fun to read this again as a strong bird on pinions free. By the way, pay attention to all the adjectives here. It'll be strong. Later we'll see some similar kinds of words. On pinions free, of course, this idea of the bird. You'll remember this from Song of Myself 41. Now to rise and sing for themselves, the bird, right? This idea. Joyous, we're going to get more joy later. The amplest spaces heavenward cleaving. Now, it's an interesting use of this word, cleaving, to cut. We've seen it in Leaves of Grass, but this idea that at some points he's going to be cutting, at other points he's going to be uniting. It's part of one of the major motifs of this poem. Such be the thought, I think of thee, America. I told you guys when we did our Hear America Singing that anytime he uses the word America, it's very particular and very special. Such be the recitative I'd bring for thee. You'll remember this recitative from To Thee, O Cause. The conceits of the poets of other lands, I bring thee not. His argument is going to be that America transcendent includes all previous cultures, all previous arts, nor the complements that have served their turn so long, nor rhyme, nor the classics, nor perfume of foreign court or indoor library, but an odor, you'll remember this from our old Fulage, I'd bring as from forests of pine in Maine, or breath of an Illinois prairie, or with open airs of Virginia, or Georgia, or Tennessee, or from Texas uplands, or Florida's glades. We've said this before. When he starts listing all of these different places of America, it's fascinating the way that he'll play that game. By the way, it's always going to be for Whitman about the physical geography of America. He'll continue, or the Saginaw's Black Stream, or the wide blue spread of Huron, with presentment of Yellowstone scenes. Of course, we living out here in Wyoming love that he mentions Yellowstones, or Yosemite, and murmuring under, pervading all, the rivers themselves murmur, you'll remember in Leaves of Grass. I'd bring the rustling sea sound, that endlessly sounds out of the cradle, endlessly rocking comes to mind, from the two great seas of the world. In other words, he's going to make the argument that, of course, will be made many times after Whitman, that America geographically sits perfectly placed to be such a light to the world. And, he continues, for thy settler sense, subtler refrains, dread mother. By the way, hear all those S sounds? Preludes of intellect, tallying these. Remember tallying in Lilac's last part 16. These and thee. Mind formulas, we're back to the second use of that. Fitted for thee, real and sane and large as these and thee. Thou, exclamation point. Mounting higher, this idea of rising with the bird, obviously. Diving deeper than we knew. Thou, transcendental union. Now, transcendentalists love this poem for this use of this word, transcendental. Only one time in Leaves of Grass does transcendental, the word itself, get used, and it's here. By thee, fact to be justified. Blended with thought. Notice all this Platonic language, justified, takes us back, obviously, to our study of Republic, and you can pick that up at learnstrong.net. Thought of man justified. Blended with God. You'll remember he says this in passage 48 of Song of Myself. I've said that the soul is not more than the body, and the body is not more than the soul, and nothing. Not God is greater to one than oneself is. This radical theology is coming back here. Through thy idea, lo, the immortal reality, through thy reality, lo, the immortal idea. He loves to play with these kind of paradoxes in the language, and he will reconfigure it to set us up for now what's coming in part 3. I believe that a lot of that kind of wordplay and syntax play is directly attributable to a study of Hegel. The idea of course, the thesis, the antithesis, blending in dialectic to become the new synthesis. Part 3. Brain of the New World. It's fascinating his use of the word brain. It's fascinating his use of the phrase New World. We'll come back to it. What a task is thine to formulate, notice the fourth time now, the modern, out of the peerless grandeur of the modern, out of thyself, obviously out of the cradle endlessly rocking, echoes start to play here, out of thyself, comprising science. This idea to formulate will see the bringing together. It's a scientific term, obviously a technological term. Out of thyself, comprising science, to recast poems, churches, art. I think this word recast is a key word in this poem, in this entire poem. In other words, this is what Whitman argues America is. We have this amazing ability to take everything that came before and to recast it through its poems, its churches, its art, and then it'll come back to the word. Recast, maybe discard them. Remember creeds and schools in abeyance from Song of Myself 1? In them, maybe, again, this is the fallibilist position of epistemology, right? I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. Maybe their work is done. And then a construction that he'll use 10 times in Leaves of Grass. Who knows? And notice that was in parenthetics. By vision, hand, conception, on the background of the mighty past, again, before it was strong, now it's mighty, mighty past, the dead. To limn, that is to say, to highlight with absolute faith the mighty living present. And yet thou, living present brain, back to the brain again, right? Heir of the dead, the old world brain. Again, the idea of evolution, transcend and include. Thou that lay folded like an unborn babe within its folds. Think about the interesting language that's chosen here to play around with mother. Earlier in Leaves of Grass, it was labeled this biology that he plays with, which is obviously shocking, especially for his readers of his day. Thou carefully prepared by it so long, happily thou but unfoldest it, only maturest it. It to eventuate, only use of that word in all Leaves of Grass happens here. In thee, the essence of the bygone time. You'll remember in Song of the Open Road 14, it's provided in the essence of things that from any fruition to success, a greater struggle is necessary. This use of his word, he loves this word essence, of the bygone time contained in thee. Think about the power of this idea of containing growth, all in Leaves of Grass as a title. Its poems, churches, arts, he'll repeat that trinity. Unwitting to themselves, destined with reference to thee. Now this use of the word destined, many have seen a Hegel reference there. Thou, but the apples, long, long, long a-growing, the fruit of all the old ripening today in thee. Well, I think that Whitman's having a lot of fun here with his use of the word apple. Why? Well, it obviously takes us to Milton and to Paradise Lost, because it will be Milton who tells us that the apple of the forbidden fruit of knowledge of Genesis 3 was in fact an apple, that fruit. Now, of course, the biblical story doesn't call it an apple. And for those of you who have your technologies and an apple with a bite out of it, you will be able to make that connection. Whitman obviously playing that game here as well. Part 4. Sounding very much now like Passage to India. Sail, sail thy best ship. I told you how he likes to stack the same word together twice. Sail, sail thy best ship of democracy. Now, our Nortons will tell us that this ship of democracy reference, we'll want to compare Whitman's use of this image with Longfellow's in the 1850 poem, The Building of the Ship, whose most famous passage begins, Thou too sail on, O ship of state. Whitman's stanza was given separate publication in the New York Tribune of February 19, 1876, under the title Ship of Democracy. And as we commented on when we did our work with O Captain, My Captain, the idea of the ship of state as well is derived from our Plato, of course. Sail, sail thy best ship of democracy. Of value is thy freight. 'Tis not the present only, notice capitalized present. The past, notice capitalized, is also stored in thee. That is to say, the germination game being played. Thou holdest not the venture of thyself alone, nor of the western continent alone. Earth's resume, you'll remember our comment about this on Night on the Prairies, entire floats on thy keel, O ship, is steadied by thy spars. Of course, you can't read lines like this without referencing, O Captain, My Captain. With thee, time, notice capitalized, voyages in trust, the antecedent nations sink or swim with thee. Wow, the burden of history. Think about what he's saying here. With all their ancient struggles, martyrs, heroes, epics, wars, thou bearest the other continents. Theirs as much as thine. The destination port triumphant. Go back to Heavenly Whispers, that poem thought, and notice his use of triumphant at the end. Steer then with good strong hand, we're back to the word strong, and wary eye, O helmsman, again, O captain, my captain comes to mind, thou carriest great companions. Venerable priestly Asia sails this day with thee, and royal feudal Europe sails with thee. In other words, the bringing together of all the world's histories now in America. Again, that Hegelian synthesis comes to mind, which leads us to passage 5 and the use of the word world 9 times. Beautiful world. Again, many have seen this as Whitman's last great statement of internationality. Whitman is international poet. Beautiful world of new superber birth. Again, the new is the new, the N-E-W is the K-N-E-W. That rises to my eyes, later it'll be ascending. Like a limitless golden cloud. Some have pointed out that when he uses this word gold or golden, he is talking about money, although he'll make the point that America is about a whole lot more than just simply wealth, financial wealth. Golden cloud filling the western sky. Emblem of great maternity, we're back to mother. Lifted above all, we're back to the rising idea. Sacred shape of the bearer of mothers and sons. Out of thy teeming womb, thy giant babes in ceaseless procession issuing. Now our Nortons will tell us that this teeming womb, that a scholar, Oscar Kagel, believes that this is the one poem that ties Whitman most completely to his times as the natural voice of breeding and prolific America, the papyrus of the new continent. Now I find that a fascinating idea, that here, where this idea again of the mother, the providing to the entire world. Out of thy teeming womb, thy giant babes in ceaseless procession issuing. Think about the number of times in Leaves of Grass where processions have factored. That is to say, some kind of procession, some kind of show of unity. It's an amazing thing how regularly we see it. And then, of course, back to rising with ascending. Ascending from such gestation, taking and giving continual strength in life. More world, world of the real, world of the twain in one, world of the soul, born by the world of the real alone, led to identity, body by it alone, yet in beginning only, incalculable masses of composite precious materials by history's cycles. There's your most obvious Hegelian reference. Forwarded by every nation, language hither sent. And obviously, we're thinking now about Passage to India and Salutamon as well. Ready, collected here, a freer, vast, electric, think about the power of technology, world, to be constructed here, the true new world. You'll remember this phrase, new world, into foreign lands, starting from Pomanak 2, Song of the